Welcome to the Trauma-Informed SLP. I'm Kim Neely, and this is my one, or kind of my first, I guess, social commentary reaction video, sort of, pseudo. That was a super solid introduction. 100% nailed that. Yes. I did see there's this whole thing about Blake Lively and, her promotion for her new movie, It Ends With Us. And it's this big movie that, spoilers, I guess, but one of the themes apparently, I know really hardly anything about this, so this is very spoiler free, but apparently one of the big themes of the book that it was based on, and then therefore also the movie, is domestic violence, or DV, as it's referred to on social media when people don't want to be demonetized. I saw some commentary on it. This is the only source I've really had in terms of clips of her interviews and stuff, because I am mostly extremely out of the loop when it comes to any sort of popular trend in entertainment or anything. I tend to be extremely out of the loop with that stuff at this point in my life. I know there's this whole layer of it of apparently there's some sort of feud going on and maybe this person was the jerk, no, maybe that person is a jerk. And I'm not going to comment on any of that stuff because I don't know, man. Once you get people with money and acting skills and all that stuff in Hollywood, there was one clip, and if I can figure it out, I'll insert it here.
Trauma and domestic abuse are going to see this film. I'm curious, what is the message that you hope that they take away from it?
You are so much, and not to minimize it anyway, but you're so much more than just a survivor or just a victim. Well, that is a huge thing. You are a person of multitudes, and what someone has done to you doesn't define you. You define you, and what you have in you and what you're capable of and what you have done and are doing and will do is so much bigger than anything anyone else can do to you.
Okay, total side note. One thing my neurodivergent self has learned by the time I'm now in my mid-40s is that if you have to say not to minimize it, but, or not to be insensitive, but, anytime there's a but after words like that, red flag that maybe you need to rethink what you're about to say and just keep it inside, maybe? Because if you add the but, not to minimize it, but, then you she inadvertently ended up basically minimizing it. From the trauma-informed perspective, what this highlighted to me is how much just in the greater United States society in general, but definitely among more privileged, financially privileged people, or maybe socially privileged, racially privileged, whatever it is, definitely among those folks, there's this lack of being able to access emotional vulnerability. And I think it really creates a big issue for people going through difficult times to actually feel safe. So essentially what I think she did in terms of trauma-informed care is she skipped over safety and went straight for empowerment, which theoretically sounds nice, but if you skip safety and go straight to empowerment, what you're actually doing unintentionally often is minimizing the need, the absolute critical need for emotional and psychological safety, particularly among trauma victims, or really anyone going through a painful experience, quite frankly. So I just want to talk about that just briefly, okay? Hopefully I can make this somewhat brief. Being able to access our own emotional vulnerability is really important. Emotional vulnerability means, yes, we are opening ourselves up to feeling some level of emotional harm or pain, but it essentially means you are acknowledging the emotions you're having, right? And ideally, if you combine it with some self-regulation and some processing skills and strategies and stuff, you can kind of work through those emotions, right? So you can acknowledge them, even if they're uncomfortable or painful, you can kind of move through them, but it also means you can allow for some space for other people to share their uncomfortable emotions, right? Like anger, shame, anxiety, loneliness, that kind of stuff, right? Domestic violence, or DV, is characterized as a sustained trauma, like a chronic trauma, like you are saturated in that really adverse, painful environment, right? And the thing about it is, whether or not you've been part of it or not, it's an uncomfortable thing to face, because I know for myself, what I often, for my own emotions, I'm feeling through empathy, I'm feeling anger that it happened to the person. I'm feeling frustration that I can't change it. I can't fix it. I'm feeling helpless in the face of the societal issue that this is and the fact that it keeps happening and I as a single person cannot stop it. And that stuff is stuff that's really uncomfortable and tough, right? But if I have access to emotional vulnerability, I can recognize and acknowledge I am having feelings about myself as a relatively, like in terms of stopping it, fairly powerless person, right? I have this sense of helplessness about it for sure. And I'm so frustrated. And especially if I'm listening to it happening to someone, it's like I am so heartbroken and so angry and so like it just is so painful and so hard. And I can only begin to imagine, and it's just really tough, right? So I got to be able to acknowledge that though, right? Because if I want to be a safe space for that person, if I want that person to be able to share those feelings with me, I need to be able to process my own feelings of my discomfort so that I can maintain like, some level of security, calmness, but still allow them, they could share those difficult emotions and I can handle it. I can process through it. And I can try to just be there as some sort of support, even if it's because it might not be fixing things, but it probably is the biggest thing I have in my power to do is to support them through all of that pain, right? To get them a glass of water when they're thirsty, to offer your hand to hold when they're about to melt down, to offer a hug. Always verbally offer it first, like see if they want it. Unless you're really close to the person and a hug would help, that's different. But, if it's a stranger or something, offer a hug if that would help them, if they want that physical comfort. Like things I can offer that says, I'm okay with how tough this is for you. I'm okay. I can take it. I can take these challenging emotions and I can be confronted with them if it helps you. I can be here for that, right? In response to Blake Lively's like, "It doesn't define you" thing, like, that is intellectually true. Yes, trauma does not have to be the one defining thing in your entire life. Absolutely. It doesn't define everything about an individual. It really doesn't. However, it's kind of like that concept of fish don't know they're in water. That whole like, essentially, if you've been surrounded and just saturated in this really like unsafe, dangerous, painful, adverse environment, that becomes the only thing you know, right? And so it's completely understandable and normal to feel like it defines you. You might intellectually know this isn't the only thing about me, but you might feel like it defines you, especially if you're either still in it or in the initial process of trying to heal from it. That makes sense. And this disconnect between what we know intellectually and what we feel is essentially the crux of why skipping past acknowledging those uncomfortable feelings, allowing space for them, actually makes somebody feel unsafe, basically, right? Because if you skip past that, then and you kind of go straight for empowerment, then what that person learns is they can't share those uncomfortable feelings. They can't share those thoughts that come from the feeling, the thoughts of, I am being swallowed by this. This is the only thing that defines me. All those that sort of negative self-talk that just naturally comes out of the sheer magnitude of what trauma victims are dealing with, you know? And also, total side note, this is kind of getting at the concept of emotional comfort from white supremacy culture, where people don't really want to allow for actually expressing difficult emotion when it comes to social adversity. And it's exactly why a lot of marginalized people don't actually feel psychologically or emotionally safe at work, or even perhaps with certain friend groups, depending on who's there, because those people aren't safe to share any level of anger or resentment or frustration or heartbreak around the types of societal adversity they experience as a marginalized person. Our inability to confront our own uncomfortable emotions often means we really value our own emotional comfort and feel like I don't really want to be confronted with it and I can make a choice not to be confronted with it. And you can make that choice. But in making that choice, it means you are not going to be a safe, emotional, psychological person for that person who has pain to go to for support. That also brings me to this little caveat of, we all have moments in life where we can't be that vulnerable, safe person for other people, right? If you're in the middle of trying to heal yourself, it's probably very difficult. It will be difficult, possibly, for you to be that really safe person for another person, right? If you're on the cusp of like a meltdown, if you're someone who has massive anxiety attacks, if you have massive depressive episodes that get triggered by this kind of stuff, and when you hear about it, like, you might not be able to be that super safe person 100% of the time, you know? And so, as with all things in relationships dealing with complex people, there's a give and a take and a compromise. And I just want to share this kind of language with people. When you have the language to help describe it, like if you're going through your own thing and maybe you're further along, but maybe there still are days where you just really can't be that support person. And so it's fair to be able to say that to someone, right? Of like, I'm actually going through my own really hard time. Like, what I could offer you right now is we could both go out and do something fun and just kind of take a break from our feelings for a while, or maybe even avoid them a little together, which is a fair coping strategy sometimes. But I'm not in a place where I can sit and like listen to you expressing your emotions right now. And that's okay. That's okay. That's part of just being human, right? Now, I would be remiss if I did not take a trauma-informed approach to why would Blake Lively say that? Because it can be lack of emotional vulnerability, lack of access to that, maybe. But it also could be that, as an actor, I have to acknowledge and respect the fact that she was probably very much interested in portraying a fully complex, three-dimensional human, and if you're looking at that through an actor lens, to portray a character like that means, yes, you can't have this one thing be the thing that defines your character. That can't be the whole thing of all the motivations that this character has, is this one event happening. So it makes sense that she might be looking through the lens of, like, in order to portray a complex human being rather than a stereotypical female, like victimized female character, as Hollywood sometimes does, she herself really needed to dig in and acknowledge the full complexity of the character. But the issue is when you take that sort of mentality, you take that actor mentality out into the world on these interviews, and somebody asks you, what would you say to real complex humans who are going through something like this? And then you say it doesn't define you. It just feels like you're skipping over safety, going straight to empowerment. Complex humans do sometimes have moments in their life where they feel completely swallowed by incredibly painful experiences. And we might know that it's not the only thing in our life. We might know we can heal from it, but that doesn't feel very true, right? And what we need most in those times when our knowing and our feelings just do not connect with each other is ideally, yes, professional guidance and help with healing, but also the real thing we need is people we feel emotionally and psychologically safe to share all our discomfort with, to share those feelings and those thoughts and be vulnerable with them. Just like in the original Inside Out movie, quite frankly, how like sadness was one of the things that connected people together, that built those relationships, that allowed people to show their love and their affection for somebody. That's pretty much what I'm getting at here, right? But we can only really access that space if we've done our own certain amount of healing, and we've increased our own awareness and our ability to acknowledge those challenging emotions. So that's my 2 cents on that, on the Blake Lively thing, from my own like trauma-informed understanding of this kind of stuff. For the rest of the drama, I guess, I don't know, go find someone else to talk about that, because I don't know. I hope some of this is helpful for you guys. Maybe some of this helps you develop a way of thinking about it or talking about it if you've happened to see any of these sort of interviews, or maybe hear someone in real life typically say things like that, and it just sort of doesn't sit right with you. Hopefully this helped you a bit. If it did, give a like, leave me a comment somewhere telling me if this did help and how it might have helped, or if there's anything else about it you really want me to try to unpack a little more. Feel free to let me know. Till next time, guys. Keep it weird, everybody. Weirdness is also a connection. That's what I feel. I feel like weirdness is a connector, when people are accepting of their own weirdness, and also when their weirdness kind of lines up with other people's weirdness.